Good evening. Welcome to Second Wind. We'd like to start by thanking our sponsors, the Old Post Pub, Fact and Fiction, Kinko's, Freddie's Feed and Read, and Fact and Fiction. Did I say Fact and Fiction? What? Oh, UC Bookstore, yes, of course. Tonight's readers are Laura Stearns, and this is her thesis reading. And you can all clap.
All right. I'm here to introduce Laura Stearns for her thesis reading. And I must say I have a slight touch of the flu, so if I seem a little woozier than usual, that is why. Not for any lack of enthusiasm for Laura. Laura started out as an accounting major at the University of Washington, of all things, but switched to English after getting a poem accepted in Seattle Times' Poetry Seattle section. Laura says that she wrote primarily fiction at the University of Washington, but after hearing Richard Hugo's last reading in Seattle, she knew that she would come to the University of Montana to study poetry. Laura is one of the most prolific poets I know. She's probably written at least 150 poems since she arrived here in Missoula. Maybe that's a slight exaggeration, but not by much. Most of us have trouble turning on the poetic faucets, but Laura has trouble turning them off, a problem that I envy her for very much. Last fall, Laura started directing her creative energy into playwriting, something she says she's always wanted to do. Her one-act play, Squatters, was very well received by her playwriting workshop, and rumor has it that this play may be produced sometime this spring. Laura's recent poetry has appeared in Hubbub and the Seattle Review and is forthcoming in the next issue of Cutbank. Laura says that her fondest graduate school memory is the time that she fell down Joel and my stairwell and had to hobble around on crutches for 2 weeks in the snow. Laura was a paralegal in another lifetime and whipped off a very terse letter to our landlord about this incident. And thanks to Laura, we now have very high-density lights in our stairwell. Much of Laura's poetry comes from her memories of childhood. Although she grew up only 15 miles away from Seattle, she says that her neighborhood seemed far removed from the city. Laura says that many of the women in her neighborhood, including her own mother, believed in ghosts, and that as a child she was often a silent observer of gatherings of women. Her poems are full of magical remnants from another world, the world of her childhood. Will-o'-wisps, lullabies, stillborns and drownings, train trestles, wind vanes, skeleton keys, cat-eye marbles, maps rolled onto spools, carved soap, mustard packs, novenas, tar paper shacks, and brooder lights are some of the many things that inhabit her poetry. In her manuscript, Lost to the World for Several Days, Laura enters the lost world of her childhood and makes it real for us. But more than that, she makes the people who live in this world come alive for us as well. She remembers the tombstone carver who lived around the corner, the widow Cooper who follows the white light of will-o'-wisps after her husband's death, the Harper boy who, quote, flooring his 63 Chevy for the gravel climb up Finn Hill, doesn't see Laura's friend, alone on the sidewalk in front of the elementary school, and Mr. Larson, the patrol monitor who tells Laura that her friend is dead. Laura says that one of the main reasons she started writing was to pay tribute to these people. She knew their stories would be forgotten as their land was sold to developers. These are lucky people, and so are we. So please welcome Laura Stearns.
Thanks, Lee. Up or okay. I've got these heels on. I feel like a tall woman's complex. Okay, before I get into the poems, there's a lot of people that I need to thank. And first and foremost, I need to thank my thesis committee. And I feel really emotional, actually. I could start crying. I won't do that. Most of all, I'd like to thank Greg Pape for your insistence on clarity and your tough love approach to my thesis. I was a little worried there for a while. And Patricia for the countless hours that you spent working with me on my poems and helping me on the book's order. And I really don't think I could have done it without you. That's really means a lot. And Raleigh Meinholtz in the playwriting department for uttering those magic words that every playwriting student, or MFA student rather, wants to hear. I don't see any problem with your thesis. That was great. That was wonderful. And to all my friends in the workshop, and to my family, and everyone. Everyone. You're great. Okay. My thesis is called Lost to the World for Several Days, and I wish I could take credit for the title, but to be really honest with you, I stole it off of a postcard that a friend of mine had bought in Seattle at an antique bookstore, and a man had written to his lover, and he was housebound, and he talked about the snow and not being able to get out, and just how awful it was. And then he ended, and he said, "Lost to the world for several days." So I thought that was great, and thought I'd steal it. I'll start with that poem. First is lamplight, then sugar cakes, turpentine, and solstice, the taste of words on my tongue. Then it is meadow fog, the whippoorwills call in the morning. Rivers and rain, on days when I cannot remember the name of someone I love. In the summer, sweet peace and steep tea, the silhouettes lovers leave in the grass. Pine pitch when autumn comes, when the resin of church pews reminds me of my family's dead. For you, only your body, blood, salt, water, bone. Not the sleepwalkers or dreamers, not twilight or thimbles, a childhood lost in blue mason jars. Come, you say, this is the place, here is the window, climb through. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Okay, the first section of the book is faith in small things, and I'm going to start with two poems that are coming out in Cut Bank. Okay. Sleeping sickness. They've kept his overalls on a nail in the back bedroom, his fishing pole on the porch. They believe he lies in the hammock between the willows, a blade of grass at his lips. Not family. I see him near death in the backwater shack, his pallet sheets soaked with the heat of his body. His family croons Emmett or Earl, a name he shares with his daddy or granddaddy, a name that rolls off their tongues like a lullaby. I envy the intimacy of their sorrow, history of stillborns and drownings. No one in his family knows to blame mosquitoes, thick all week in the places he played. Had I been there when his body first quivered, I would have grasped his shoulders and insisted he wake up. Like a dowser who finds water, I expect someday to move paperweights without touching them, make a radio snap on. When my father died, I said I would give up writing to bring him back, and for a while I believed resurrection could happen. What sacrifice would this boy's family give? What holds us here must hold others. Thanks. Can you guys hear me? I'm going to start to relax in a minute. Okay. This next poem is called Signals, and unfortunately it's a true poem. I wish I could say I wasn't. Signals. When we were 13, we lived by signals. Yours, a rag doll slung over your father's porch rail. Mine, slow steps between the field, between our houses, skeletons of ice crunching under my boots. When he wasn't there, I could feel the hands that pulled the blue plate from the oven, the lips that scowled at the chicken and cream sauce, peas boiled to mush. I thought you were indifferent. You didn't care about dances or black fishnet stockings. You didn't watch dime store lipsticks drop like coins on your bed. When he said he wanted to be first, when he called you night after night into his dim bedroom, pulled back the sheets and commanded you to lie down, what were you thinking? The only world I knew was my parents' fenced acre, the house built from a blueprint, 4 children, Sunday school, picnics in the meadow. By summer, you told me, and I told no one, afraid he might press a knife to my throat. What I wrote into my white diary those nights was this: today, Father mowed the lawn, Mother finished her canning. Okay. My neighbor man used to be a firefighter, and he told me a story that I find this kind of hard to believe, but I thought, well, it's going to make a great poem. He said people will be inside of a house that's burning, and they'll have the chance to leave, to run, but they won't. And I thought, well, that's really weird, but I'll turn it into a poem. Faith in small things. A man stands inside a burning room, this room part of his house, this house part of a neighborhood where all houses are the same, all driveways circular, surrounded by neatly clipped lawns. Typical afternoons, he remembers the lathered smell of horses, the rasp of grain down the silo chute on his grandfather's farm. But this afternoon is different. Smoke is clouding his lungs. 12 paces to the window, a sprained wrist or ankle to the cool grass below. And though parts of his life are missing, the salmon sunsets he meant to witness in Africa, the baked puzzle pieces he hoped to sketch into a book he cannot jump, bring back the wife who left him, her black silk slippers mocking his in the closet all these years. As a child, he was told the body is comprised of components, a husk, his grandmother said, and spirit, the essence of what the chalky-breathed woman and all his dead relatives, even his wife, have become. He divides himself, one part spirit, one part husk, the man he really is, already dead on the floor. I think I had a lot of traumatic things happen to me in my childhood, and this is another poem about an event that really influenced me when I was a kid. Tadpoles and fractions. Not a hairpin curve or ice-glazed berm, not hail on the windshield or lightning in the mirror, but a pencil-stray road in September, and you all alone on the sidewalk in front of the elementary school, thinking about tadpoles and fractions. The Harper voice said he didn't see you, flooring a 63 Chevy for the gravel climb of Finn Hill, bored with autumn's bright processional of scarlet and sienna, bored with his sister's nightly novenas and mother's pleadings that he stay away from those tar paper shacks where boys sheared chamois cloths over pounded out fenders and took hard swallows of their fathers' watered-down whiskey and rum. Only the bulldog on his hood and St. Christopher on the dash witnessed his falling. Mr. Larson, the patrol monitor, told me you were dead. I watched him cover you with his gray coat until the only thing left was your blood and the skid marks veering like an equation that never makes sense. I stood with the other children in a circle, our bodies motionless as a pool of afternoon light that bound us, until our mothers came, tapping our shoulders and saying our names just to make sure. My mother said my name twice, and we held hands tight as we walked down the road, past the turnoff to your house, past the stream where we all knelt at some time or other to catch tadpoles darting through quicksilver water, and a person knew to swerve fast with their hand or risk having to stand up and swear in front of everyone you didn't see anything at all. I promised my friend Michael I'd read a poem for him, and he came all the way from Seattle, so this is for you, the cartographer. While other boys collected cat-eye marbles and baseball cards in shoe boxes, you wandered old bookstores for maps rolled into spools, dusty as cracked book spines. Leaning against the glass counter, you smiled at the sullen-faced clerk, counting each nickel into the till. Your favorite maps had no interstates or secondary roads. Instead, the brushstroke of emerald, turquoise, and gold. Schooner trails crisscrossing oceans, legends of Persia, the Aleutian Islands, the Dead Sea. Place names you recited as you tied each map with twine to your bike fender for the slow ride home. You thumbtacked them on your bedroom wall, the nightlight burning. On the bedstand, a picture of your father, dead 3 years. And you wondered at this world's meticulous details, your mother downstairs moving through rose-colored light, her thin hands folding linens into dark drawers smelling of parsley and carved soap. This, you vowed, was your purest vocation, to gaze for unblinking hours into jagged mountains, inlets no bigger than your fingernail tracing parchment, the paintbrush's path as it shaded in the bordered space of the smallest, most remarkable things. This is one of those poems about my childhood, and it, as Lee said, my childhood seemed really magical, and I hope to cash in on it by writing a novel. That's next. Okay, barn swallows. Surrounded by birch trees and sugar maples, ghosts of Appaloosas nickering hay, and cows with milk-white eyes, that barn rose on the slow, uneven hill of my childhood, a cobweb house inhabited by barn swallows, a family who sang all their words. Skittering in and out of 2 carved crescent moons, those birds knew the ribs of rafters and corners where whispered dreams lay still. Neighbor boys took the Bunnell girl there, her toothless grin as she ambled barefoot, of nails laddering a beam of pocket-knife wood. Mother warned my sisters and me away, but we wedged a wide circle on Sundays after church, eager to exchange our pale pinks and patent leathers for wind-dried jeans, mud boots for Montgomery wards. Lured by the wind vane spinning, we splattered plums onto gray wood, split by rain. When only the dark stains answered, we pulled open the door and entered single file through flower dust light, sifting the musk of mildew and damp cotton, handkerchiefs crumpled to hay. Dangling our legs from the loft, we spoke of the skeleton keys and the idiot boy who lived 2 pastures over with his mother, who always jumbled our names. And the white light the widow Cooper followed, calling it her will-o-wisp, telling us it vanished ice cold into the floorboards the morning we found her kneeling, her flannel nightgown trailing bare linoleum. Someday, my older sister said, I will live in a mansion, and she described butlers toting biscuits, the crepe paper lanterns strung beside a pool where shooting stars glistened and fell. My little sister and I nodded, twining a bracelet of straw. When hunger came, we bit into bitter apples, twisted the stems to an alphabet of boys, bent over polished chrome and engines. The birds have a right, my older sister said. They can always go. We knew the secret places she meant, Lapland, the mud-baked Congo, everywhere fathers. National Geographic took him night after night under the front room's dim glow. When we stumbled into the night air, there was a new order to everything, dinner plates being carried from cupboards to counters, the electric fence buzzing, and the Bunnell girl lying on her bed, staring at the bluebell wallpaper, suddenly grown old. This next poem is... Can I just hold this? Okay. My grandmother told me this story, and she was, I think she was about 89 at the time she told me, and she was crying, and I was taping her stories, and when she got to this story, I was like, I didn't know what to say, and sometimes it's hard when people tell you these kind of things. Anyway, legacy. My grandmother's uncle wanted her the way he had wanted all of her sisters, their bodies pinned to the kitchen's pine table, the tablecloth puckered into fists, a bowl of unshelled peas or sliced beets shattered each time to the floor. With her, he tried in the barn, a corner beside the corn crib where she bent counting eggs. I have to have it, he said, saying he had taken each of her sisters. My grandmother lifted a hatchet like a lantern or torch, told him if he stepped closer, she would drive the blade through a skull. An uncle, she kept telling me, crying when she remembered the years it took to tell her father, how she and her sisters never discussed it at all. Why couldn't they speak when one of them came to the others at the clothesline or chicken coop when their eyes looked down or away? Now my grandmother and her sisters are dead, and I do not know who to wake or how to speak with my mouth of wood. My dad absolutely loved trains, and whenever I hear the trains go through Missoula, I think of my dad, and I feel happy, but I also feel sad because I really miss him. And this is a poem about trains for him. Trains. Those times he spoke of trains, my father's memory never failed him. Always the Southern Pacific, Enid, Oklahoma, 1932. Afternoons he placed pennies on the track, while the 407 rolled east out of Tulsa, plumes of black smoke against all of that red dirt. That was the year his father's brain tumored, and my father's face and name were lost, with cousins and uncles, the doctors who wound bandages on his father's skull. When fever set in, he walked the station, dreamed of riding in the blue haze of smoking cars, or better yet, living with the men who cooked rabbits over coals and slept under trestles, men who had been to Chicago and New York, Duluth, and St. Paul. My father said he would have paid money to be like them, to carry all he owned in a tablecloth pulled from a clothesline, his pocket knife and stopwatch, the Purple Heart his father won in the war. Instead, he wore a blue uniform, 30 years on the police force, my mother always afraid. I wanted him to ride before I died, to send postcards of factories and steamers, those cities he thought he could love. Instead, he left a half-finished crossword, a timetable to destinations I've not heard of, in countries I don't know. Okay. This is another poem about my dad. I've always had trouble reading my poems, right, in front of groups, so you can imagine how I feel right now. Terrified. But when I brought this poem to workshop, it was 6 weeks after my dad died, and I thought, well, I must be crazy to be writing about my dad's death, and then even crazier to be willing to read it in front of a group of people who are, going to criticize it, and you're reading, and you can hear people scraping, furiously commenting on your work, and I thought, I'm not so good at that. But this is called Light Years Away. My father gathers stones in his garden. Nightfall pulls over my father's land like a drawn shade. There is no way he can know, pushing his wheelbarrow into the tin shed, that this night will happen, that 4 hours after supper, the moon will appear like a sickle in the window, and he will lie face down on the dining room floor and die. My mother, swirling a dish rag over sealed jars, cannot know, nor can her children, folding clothes in their houses. She will phone each of them and say, I thought he was sleeping. If my father had known, he would have gathered gifts and left them in conspicuous places. A bushel of Indian corn on the porch steps, in his pockets, pill bottles of seeds from the red poppies that bloomed decades ago along the front fence. Or he would have brought us the night lightning stormed our windows, and he could cook over us in his woodshop, told stories we had not heard before or since. But he cannot know, and I cannot know, when I lie down and can't sleep, that this is the night marking all of my darkness in his sudden, beautiful end. Okay, moving into the second section of the book, lately the curve of my life, and I stole this title from David Braden. So David's not here because he's sick, but I'll just say thanks, David. Okay, the first poem is Those Years. Those years, it wasn't earthquakes or tornadoes, but my father's job that scared me. Phone calls that broke the night silence, that pounded like a nightstick against the windows of our house. It was a blue uniform mother pressed on Sundays, while Cronkite said Watts in Kent State. It was the creak of black shoes and gun belt as he walked past my bedroom, knowing in the city he would be called Pig, Narc, and the Fuzz. The father who returned would be someone else's, would say how much he loved my father, promised 21 guns at dusk. Mother worried too and told me, say insurance, never policeman, even among friends. But I did because there was that part of me that thought hero and wanted them to know his life was in danger, might end on the local news, mother cradling a photo or flag. I'd learned to say honor and duty, ignore the lips that snickered when I cried. But the demonstration stopped and the phone stayed quiet all night. 30 years in, my father retired, said he wasn't sorry, but would never go back. I wanted to say I was happy. I wanted to tell him I lay awake those nights and worried he'd die, but I didn't, because I saw him cry with one of his cronies and knew, for the first time, he had a life apart from us that was ending. I don't think I'd show this next poem to my mom, but if this is on TV, she might see it. So, we enjoy a healthy mother-daughter relationship. That's all I can say. Passage. The white enamel cupboard in my parents' garage glistened like an iron lung. I stood in front of it the September I turned 13 and decided life depended on passion, as I had once decided that breaking my leg or becoming an orphan would bring pity from the shy, dark-eyed boy down the street. I stood in front of it because its dusty shelves held glass, mason jars of floating peaches and pears, a testimonial to my parents' labors, to all my father tended with his safe hands, and bottles, sea greens with funneled necks that felt cool, indifferent to the chemistry of root beer, the rewards of waiting. Where the brown river had spilled, I found tiny sugared beads. They were sweet on my tongue. In the kitchen, my mother waited, worried her iron over starched dresses my legs and arms had outgrown. Not this week, she'd say. I'll open a bottle next week, I promise. While I waited for one of those next weeks, a girl from school died swallowing a cloud of siphoned gas. Had she lived, I might have asked her what near death tasted like, if she saw her ghost dance like a lace slip in the wind. I might have broken a bottle for the sake of splintered worlds, the air I didn't know I was learning to breathe. This is another true event in our childhood. My sister's laughing. Intruder. Like sleeping ghosts, our nightgowns lay on the blankets turned down for our late return. While Mom blotted her lipstick to tissue, Dad turned the living room lamp on low. My sisters and I helped, drawing the curtains halfway. At our grandparents' house, we played Yahtzee, watched blue-collar workers swinging their lunchboxes like lanterns through the night. Riding home between my sleeping sisters, I always felt safe. But once, we arrived to our front door wide open. Dad called out while Mom and my sisters and I waited in the car. Whoever it was, Dad said, left boot prints bigger than his own in the flower bed dirt, but fled without as much as a spoon. I cried as we walked under the moon spotlight. It was as though each room in our house had been damaged by fire or flood. Not even my nightgown or body, nothing belonged to me anymore. Last year I called this my failed marriage poem, and I think I'll call it my failed marriage poem again, if I can't think of anything else to call it. Okay. Actually, I'm trying to be nice in this poem. Kansas wheat country. Out here we could drive forever without a map. The fireflies burning like stars. Prairie rolls to farms and to wheat. The stone houses, legends that landmarks become. We are still new in our marriage. Wise to hold hands as we drive past your grandparents' gate. The lawn chairs pulled to deep shade. After sleep, your grandparents will beckon us to coffee and rolls. Ask for snapshots of my white dress. A petal from the carnation we unpinned from your tuxedo and left to last at home in the freezer. What will we tell them? Our moments already so sudden, so unsure in the borders our generation travels, that I cannot wish anything to last past the prediction of wind. I will reach for the fold of your sleeve, the crook of the arm I shape to night after night, already knowing lost faith never returns. Years will go by, and then our marriage will end. It will be your grandparents' photos I examine under lamplight, their faces a journey to my dark kitchen table each anniversary, bearing a white cake, 100 white candles. This is just a weird poem. I don't know what it means. Okay. The spinster considers the fall harvest moon. Tonight's moon has the ripeness of a yellow egg plum, the perfect circle of an embroidery hoop. I stand before the bay window, wanting to always know this bright glow, this gathering in my garden, bluebells, cockleburrs, Queen Anne's lace. Where does the moon go after white petticoats and lawn parties, after the patter of bathhouse showers, our skin, the delicate blush of pink frosting on tea cakes? Does she haunt the scavenger hunts under willows, keep awake the men who were once boys, oblivious to our locked arms and blood finger rituals? She is persistent as tuberose, a white root I slice into crescents, then carry to the dark humus of my greenhouse. Uncle Cyrus showed me the moon frost on corn stalks, taught me to know the rainwater smell of raked leaves. The stone house he lived in had oilcloth curtains, the whir of my mother's treadle as she mended his trousers on Sundays. Last month, when the summer sky slid away, I thought of Cyrus plotting the moon, the musty smell as he opened the attic trapdoor to toss goose-down quilts to me. He called the moon Lucinda Angel, the twin who lay still with me in the trundle while I listened to mother and father play whist, and Cyrus's arthritic hands falling again and again on the ivory keys of the spinet. Now early evenings, my neighbor visits. We sit on the porch, talk of his bee houses, my quinceberry jelly. After he leaves, I walk through each room, winding the music boxes, thinking of lightning bugs straining their way through nets, tied over the primrose in a white winter garden. I had this aunt, Juanita Lee Stearns, and She died when she was about 6, so of course I never met her. But I've mythologized her, and I think she's like God or a goddess or something. So this is a poem for her. Aunt Juanita Lee. Your baby book christens you to an era of porcelain dolls and pink ribbons, an antique girlhood ending abruptly in the darkest limbs of my family tree. It was pneumonia that took you, rising like well water in your tiny lungs when you were 6. But I'm selfish and won't let you lie there nap time still in your eyelet frock while crickets sing and fireflies glow, caught inside cheesecloth nets pulled across a dusky back lawn. Once, my mother confessed crying over your bottle-thick eyeglasses and the velvety funeral corsage she found buried in the bottom of grandmother's trunk. Now grandmother's gone, and those tokens are the only clues we have to you, and the spellbound years she spent beside windows, listening to your schoolmates Naomi and Madeline push their wicker buggies through shade. You are safe with me, and your life still matters. The small voice calling me through twilight to cover my eyes and try and find you from a long way. I have this man who appears in my poetry, and he's 40 or 40-ish, and I'm not sure if he's married or divorced. I don't know what his story is, but he just shows up, and here he is again. Survivor. When you recall the old man with the hook arm who spent 12 years in a sanatorium, remember the hours he tended tomatoes. Remember the trowel he used to break hard earth, the ditches that came of his efforts, 4 shallow graves filled with rain. Remember the sack heavy as drowned kittens, how your mother pulled you inside the gate and said no. It's all right that no one in your family would discuss the trucks that carted families like cattle through the streets. It's all right that none of them believed you belonged. You didn't imagine moonlight glinted the metal beneath his torn sleeve, or that he attempted to earn money cleaning windows with milky water and rags. You did see him break ice months later, hold a shard to his face, and draw blood. This is about as funny as my poetry gets, and I don't think this poem's very funny, but last year, I think I read this last year and people laughed, so I thought, well, I better have a couple of funny poems, and I hope this one is. My grandfather visits. His coffin skin reminds me of pie dough. You're dead, I say. Stop tapping your cane along the white picket fence of my childhood. All those bluebells and poppies, the picnics we had in the meadow out back. I have a story, he says. I already know. The time you danced with my grandmother in the dim parlor after poker, Miller and Dorsey, her diamond ring sold that night for your one bad roll. Sorry, he says, about all of that. Oh, I have it down, I say. The gypsy fortune teller's prediction, the time you showed up whiskey drunk on grandmother's stoop. And what were you thinking? All those dark molasses-haired Hungarian sisters clucking behind the curtain. Still, I say, I'm always looking for men just like you. Your broken back wish to die with your boots on. Grandmother cried till the end for you. She used to grasp my hand like an old dish rag, say, I want to be with Pop. He was such a good, good man. My grandmother, maternal grandmother, spent a little bit of time in Montana, and she used to say, oh, it's so cold there. And when she told me these stories, I never thought I would end up in Montana. And now, if I ever have kids, I'll say, it was so cold there. And anyway, she worked in the sugar beet fields outside of Billings, and it sounds like she had a really hard time. Anyway, this is a poem about that. Naming an end in winter. This story bleeds red and smells of rain clouds, storms rattling root cellar doors, My grandmother's grandmother dying in a field tent outside Billings, a skeleton sipping onion broth, the only meal my grandmother could scrounge, then spoon through broken teeth. I promised her I'd tell it in a book and to my daughters, tell of its end in winter, with frozen skirts and frost clinging the sugar beets like glitter, with the pine coffin and 4 candles burning. I wanted to know the other field hands were singing, mourning doves outside the landowner's window. Wanted to know if Faith brought spring's blue crocus, a break in pond ice, but it was late. My grandmother's eyes closed, already gone the long way back without me. This is the only poem that survived from my undergraduate days, and this feels really old, but I'm going to read it anyway. Porch lights. At dusk in unmapped towns, they are all we hope for, painting white across cracked porches where rusted milk cans gather moss and rain-split doors lock tight against wind. Farmhouse porch lights blaze like beacons over rain-down fields of wheat and stone. We bear their burning like a sadness set out to sun, a curled spoon left in the paint-chipped drawer of our first house to say, we loved here once. For years they whisper welcome, in aster beds gone to seed, lawns waist-high in weeds. Only long driveways stop us, dark as night sky's clouded path, the road we can't follow or blame. Okay, now we're moving into the final section, giving the darkness shape. This first poem is called All I Can See. All I can see of that night in Pool Husk is a midnight blue sky and a boy. His good ear turned to the weather vanes whirring. He walks outside to mimic the spin with his body before stumbling like a crippled goat in the grass. How odd it must have been to watch the stars fall, knowing nobody was there to pull him like a drowned person from the river of smoking grass at his feet. Tonight, I want to believe disasters are fabrications, like death's small door or the rings of light around the body, but I know I am wrong. Sarajevo, Chernobyl. My grandmother spoke to me out of her stroke after months of babble. Do not be sad when I die. I imagine a room where our parents still hold us, call us their children, and safe. This is the poem from the title, Giving the Darkness Shape. Towards nightfall, the cancer comes for grandfather's blood, his bones, his face. Each hour, the nurses turn his bed-sored body toward the sleep of white lilies, carnation wreaths from grandmother's church. Grandfather's curled too tight for a wheelchair, a ride down the hall. He does not recognize my sister or me, standing beside his bed like small angels. Rise, we want to say. Chatter to us in mock Chinese. Tell us your headhunter stories, how you swam back to the ship's belly in a rain of spears. Our parents do not speak. This vigil kept so long by the bedside, in the dark lobby, all night next to the phone. If he knew it was cancer, grandmother says, he would jump out the window. Your Uncle Clem and Noreen and Pearl all dead. We drive back to our grandparents' house, to grandfather's racer propped in the glass, his ribbed undershirts draped on the drying rack in the tub. Pop won't die, grandmother says, stirring and stirring, a deep crock of apricots on the stove. My sister and I do not have any words, only the crude crosses for distempered kittens, a banty who wandered the road. Our parents sit on the sofa and watch the late news. I carry the deck of cards to them. Someone shuffles and the whole house stills. I think I better hurry. No? Okay. I'm not going to read all 54 pages, I promise. Well, I never really thought I'd write a poem about this next little event, but there's a chance that I'll never be asked to give another poetry reading again, so I thought, well, I'm going to read this poem. Damn it. So, Night Spirits. Okay. Call the seers what you will, but I too witnessed one of those small lights, said to hover marshy swamps and fields. It happened in my childhood bedroom, where I lay in the dark after scolding, all I owned or wanted, imagine stuffed into a pillowcase and pushed past the hoarfrost rings that slept all winter on the window. At first, I thought a light left over from the bedside lamp, or worse, my eyes blinded finally by the furnace flame my mother warned me from. But when I turned the light on, it disappeared, and all that breathed was my open book, like a giant moth beside the heater. When I turned the light off again, it reappeared and began to bounce as if teasing, a bobber on a fishing line above my head. I felt no fear, and I've never thought to ask or tell, but I've wondered since what it meant. Perhaps near death I'll know why there are mysteries textbooks can't explain away, secret families that mean to love us even though they've disappeared. Okay, I'm going to do some quick editing here. Okay, as Lee mentioned, our neighbor man was a tombstone carver. And he was a great guy. I used to set up my lemonade stand in front of his house, and he would pay me $20 for like a cup of lemonade. He was great. I was rich when I was a kid. The tombstone carver's house. If the dead's names or dates were there, I don't remember. Only the slabs stacked like bricks behind Mr. Henry's shed, grays and blacks, dotted with flecks that looked like sugar clumps and felt as rough. After supper, my sisters and I took dares to run his pasture, to press our palms to the stones and count to 10. Don't be afraid, I chant, my white breath, a winding cloth for dolls. If lights flicked on, we knew we'd lost. I lost once, his wife, thin with cancer at the window, her face a cold cream mask, the kind our mother scooped from jars. We held each other's gaze, mine dark with shame, and hers a look I'd never seen before, hate or fear or maybe sorrow. So I looked away to find the shedded snakeskins I knew were near, and my fingers went numb as wet flesh will when touched to ice. Still no locks unclicked or screen door swung, and Mr. Henry didn't appear, a hand of cards or bottle raised. I'd heard of the sun he switched, imagine the bell looping air, and I think I almost wanted that, or at least a shaking, not his wife too sick to care, and the lights clicked off, and me alone to witness when near death does its bearers turn to ghosts, past worry over tip feeders and toppled cans. And I never heard a word about it, not from them or my parents, not my sisters who stood beyond and called me home, voices from somewhere in the dark. Okay, I really want to read this final poem because I really attribute a lot of my writing talent to my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, who told me her stories every Sunday for as long as I could remember. And she was just educated. I think she only went to grade school, but she had a beautiful voice, and she was very musical and a great storyteller. So I also promised her, almost on her deathbed, that I'd write a book about her. I haven't done that. But this is a start. This is a poem. I'm not going to do this in her Austrian accent, 'cause I don't think I could. My grandmother tells the story, one, gypsies. In the old country I saw them, their shawls the color of fire. They'd snap their babies' legs like wishbones, then set them to beg in the streets. At night, They stole our dogs and lard. We found their handprints and said, "They're so dirty, they carry disease." But once in America, I paid one to stroke my palm. What she saw came true. Your grandfather, the willow trees that circled the farm. How could someone know my life that well? Look at my hands all shriveled, the skin that hangs like gloves. A gypsy looking into them now would see only black rivers. Why didn't she tell me cancer would eat your grandfather's bones, that 2 days after Christmas he'd die, half-eaten candy cane, his glasses and watch, handed to me in a sack? If we told him, he would have begged for a gun. What am I left with? His wood shop, the refrigerator of old paint, the picture of him in the coal mines that a canary promised safe every morning. Nothing is safe to lungs filling with black soot. During the war, he sold tires. Out of pity, he loaned money to a stranger. I had to sell my ring. We rationed thin soup for weeks. I would pay all my coins to bring him to restorative waters, to let the gypsies rub oil on his skin, carry him to the Black Forest, to his father, the violin maker, the castle they lost in the invasion. Did you know you were his favorite? 2. Village I can't find on a map. There was a village. I can't remember its name. Mulberries grew along the river. We fed the leaves to the silkworms our father raised in the parlor. At night, I heard them munching, tearing tiny holes. Once a lamb was lost in the hills. I heard it bleeding. Its mother had fallen into a crevice and had to be shot. Then my mother died. The villagers built her a pine coffin. When I saw her lying there in her wedding gown, I thought, she is so beautiful, and I wanted to kiss her. 4 candles, always burning. We traveled steerage to America. Every day the cook gave me a sip of vinegar, a cure for dysentery. One bunk over, a stranger's favored twin died, her body wrapped in a barrel cloth and tossed like a giant fishhook into the ocean. I stood a long time, watching. When I die, sing Ave Maria and the Hungarian hymns your great-grandfather sang on the boat. In the boxcar of cottonseed, we slept our first American night. But don't bring flowers. Flowers are for the living. I've lived in so many places, Texas, Nebraska, Wisconsin, even Alberta, the muskeg frozen past spring, a wagon fallen into the Athabasca, a mile from our homestead, the ice frozen over like a suture. When my uncle was dying, he said, "He's coming to get me. He's coming to get me." It was Satan. All those years he had his way with my sisters. Take these stories and know how fear has kept a fever in my throat. When I cry now, it's for that lamb, my sisters, and rain. 3. Burning snake. After the river flooded, we heard a sound like a baby crying. My father ran to the barn and we followed. A snake was hypnotizing a chicken. My father shot the snake, said the mate would come looking. He built a fire, then held the snake over the flames with a pitchfork. The sky was black, the snake, a giant streamer glowing. After that, I wasn't afraid. My father had given the night to his children. 4. Music on the prairie. In Texas, I heard angels singing. It was Christmas Eve, and my family had gone to midnight mass. It was my year to stay home and tend to the cooking. I was alone on the prairie. Where did that music come from? A wild hen was cooking, and the dolls my grandfather made from corn cobs sat in a row under the tree, listening. On the porch, I lit dozens of candles and stood alone, happy in the blazing circle. Thanks.